I want to ask about the drone capabilities that we already have so far, about how many kinds of drones do we have that are at the disposal for the U.S. military?
Well, you saw today, and in this event, TRex generally, over 100 different drone types, right? So that's a lot. And what we do from there is give them prototypes space and give them this operational environment to operate in. And then we down select. And some improve, and then new entrants come in. So right now, fielded, there's probably dozens, but we're trying to make dozens more. And then when we have the right mix from an arsenal standpoint, you start mass producing them so that you have lots of them wherever you need them in the world.
Well, and the Army Secretary said back in June that the U.S. would not be prepared for a drone attack. What do you think?
There's drone are doing an attack. We'll be ready for that. We are ready for that. When we talk about how do you counter drones, we're still trying to develop even more sophisticated systems to counter drones in any environment, right? If you look at the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, how do you counter those but do it cheaply? So what I think he was referring to is the cost, right? So we could, with expensive munitions, take out pretty much any drone attack against a U.S. service member, warfighter, or U.S. asset. The question is, can you match the cost of what they're sending versus the cost of what we're using to take it out? You don't want to send a big Tomahawk missile to take out a $5,000 drone. You want to take a $1,000 drone to take out a $5,000 one. So what we're working on now is sort of the cost ratio of making sure that we're using our money effectively.
And you mentioned mass production and that being something that needs to be worked on. Right now in the U.S., do you have any concerns about our ability to mass produce drones?
Well, I don't. And the reason is that the drones, a lot of them are very simple. I think when you'll see, there's one today, I forget the name of it, it's 3D printed. You could print one in 35 hours. You could potentially put that printing machine downrange at a military base and it could just churn overnight printing a drone. And then it's modular so you can add different pieces to it. So you think about the various ways we can mass produce these. It's not just what you think about a factory that's producing cars. They're produced in all different manners, and part of the selection that we make of these competitors who've come to TRex is how mass producible is it? How exquisite is it? How simple and complex is it? Is it modular, and can you add different parts to it so you can manufacture the different parts in volume and then put them together at the site and the place that you need them?
Right. Now we know that China can mass produce millions of drones. How can we get there here in the U.S.? Yeah,
the Chinese started with really consumer drones, right? And they then everyone was buying their consumer drones just to fly around consumer drones, and that was their base. We are starting with military capable drones. That's the primary thing we're doing. And our industrial base is different insofar as we can use robotics to do things in a more automated way to compete with the cheap labor that they do on their side. So if you imagine the robotics capabilities that we have in this country, look at a Tesla and how it's made mostly with robots and how it's designed to be simpler with its parts. So we're trying to engineer things in a way that we can mass produce them in a way that China can. We're doing the old way, we're doing it the new way.
Right. So are we going to see these factories coming to the U.S. where we will see more of a mass production of these kinds of drones?
Absolutely. You will see a lot of that, and it'll be impressive.
Now, obviously, we've seen the drone capabilities between Russia and Ukraine. What have we learned from that? What's going on there, and how we can take that information and make our drones better, maybe? Yeah.
So we've learned a few things. Number one, it's not a static question. These drones are changing in capabilities every 3 to 4 weeks, which is staggering, right? You've never had a conflict where the munitions are changing every 3 to 4 weeks. Number two, the warfighters, the people who are actually operating these drones, are the ones who are actually improving them. They're in some cases writing software. They're saying, well, what if we do this? And they're doing the experimentation at the very lowest level of the warfighter. So when the Marine General talked about getting these to his units in the Marines, It's so that they can feel and touch them and experiment with them and say, this doesn't work in this environment, this does, and they could iterate sort of on site, if you will. And that's a totally new way of thinking, right? Usually you deliver a big weapon system to a troop, they read the manuals, they understand how to use them. This now we're going to rely on the warfighters to be part of the innovation loop. And that's what the war in Ukraine and Russia taught us.
And two, I was reading about some of the American drone companies and how some of them do use some Chinese parts. Of course, in the military, it all has to be American made. Have there been issues with that? Are there ways to kind of expand our supply of different parts for drones in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, that process is well underway. I would say that 95% of the drones you see here today are American made, and the other 5% are allied made, UK, Canada, Australia. So we're sort of gotten the Chinese parts that are exploitable out of these systems. And that was a key priority for the president and for Secretary of Defense. And all these companies know that and develop with that in mind.
Right. Now, I think when people think war, they think about these tanks and they think about all the different, guerrilla warfare, whatever, all kinds of things. How are drones the new face of warfare? Tell me about that.
If you think about the last wars that the United States were in, the Middle East, and you had tanks and you had improvised explosive devices that were, meant to get after the tanks, and then we had countermeasures to build tanks that were resistant to those mines, if you will, or improvised explosive devices. That's sort of an old type of warfare that we're not likely to see very much. And you look at the Iran conflict that we had bombers drop very precision munitions in a specific way with lots of intelligence. And so when you see Ukraine and Russia, that's more likely the sort of trajectory of warfare, where the front lines are not humans and tanks. The front lines are machines and robots figuring out how to counter each other. And that's a big lesson. I think the world's learning that lesson right now.
What would you say the biggest challenges that the U.S. faces in reaching drone dominance?
I'd say the biggest challenge that we face is just changing the way we think about how we design, build, and produce these kinds of drones. It is no longer you have a factory line that doesn't change for 3 years and you're producing the same thing that comes out the other side forever. It has to be modular. It has to be able to change both software and hardware consistently. And that mindset shift is something that is sort of the biggest change from where we were.
When we're talking about TRex, so this is something that's been going on over the past week, how is this day compared to past T-Rexes? I think the first one was back in 2023, right?
Yeah. It was a few years ago. The sophistication of what you see today, the volume of what you see today, I don't know if you saw the wasps, which were a big box, because things call it a nest of some sort of hornet's nest, and it could fit dozens of drones in it, each with different sort of missions, right? Different payloads, different flight times or flight speeds and so on. And that can be trucked around on a truck. And that box can open up and you can launch these missions. I mean, you think about the sophistication of that today, which probably wasn't there in 2023. And now you're talking about 103 systems today, where we're probably tripled that in the last couple of years. Right. So just the volume of industry participants that are excited about doing this, and the focus for the government. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars per year now that we weren't spending in that time frame, making sure that these companies can prototype and test in its real operational environment. That's very sophisticated, much more sophisticated than it's ever been. I think at the next T-Rex, you'll see a lot of counter drone measures. So we're going to test the drone guys against the counter drone guys, and we're going to see how that goes. And we're going to do another cycle of improvement. And so that motion, that culture, if you will, is really taking hold inside of the DoD right now.
And we're not in direct conflict right now. How else are these drones being used across the country right now?
I mean, the drones could be used to deliver medicine. They could be used to deliver supplies. They could, they're mobile, they're robotic vehicles, so they could transport things depending on how heavy the payload is. They could do a lot of things that would surprise people, both in the commercial sector and the military sector. So they're going to be used for all kinds of tasks where you might have had to send a ship or a truck to deliver this thing along a dangerous route. Well, you could just send a drone to deliver that. It could be medicines to troops in the field. It could be a lot of things. This technology has broad applicability across a lot of use cases.
Undersecretary Michael, is there anything else that you think is really important for Americans to know about where we're at right now with our drone capability and how much further we have to get to reach drone dominance?
Yeah, I'd say that we have designed this program around the warfighter. And what that means is when we think about a drone capability, we're also thinking about the guy or gal in the field. Where's this drone stored? Is it safe where it's stored? How long can it be stored? How is it launched? Does it have to be launched with 2 humans? How heavy is it so it can be taken out? What mission should it be used for? Is it simple enough so that they can operate it in a stressed environment? Does the capability in a world where communications is denied, there so it could work? So it all comes down to the warfighter in the field, and then secondarily the cost. How do we get the cost down so we can mass produce it and we could counter low-cost attacks with even lower-cost defenses? And those are the 2 things I'd sort of message everyone out there. I think it's a sea change. I'd say that, when I was in Silicon Valley, there was hesitance to cooperate with the US military. That is gone. Those days are over. And companies are excited to be working with the DoD, from Silicon Valley to Indiana to Florida. And that, for me, that culture change in the country, you can call it patriotism, you can call it the fact that DoD, under new leadership from President Trump, from Secretary Hegseth, and from myself, we're opening the front door to businesses and say, come work with us. There's no side doors, this is no, we're not talking to you, we're not giving you feedback, just respond to our proposal on paper and we'll see. We're trying to open that door wide so they come in, and we're giving them real-time feedback and giving them quicker yeses and quicker nos so they go back to their drawing board if it's not working and it can work better the next time. And that's a change, that's a total change in how DoD operates. When we think about the warfighter and their families and sort of the stress that puts on a family to feel that your loved one's in harm's way, the more we could take back the risk from their actual physical safety, the better that warfighter should feel, the better their family should feel, right? So if I could take someone 5 miles back from the front line, where they're going to be more protected, closer to a base, or I could deliver them something where they're not driving a diesel truck across some hard terrain, that should make every warfighter and their families feel better that the U.S. military and the DoD has their back and is trying to make sure that we're taking any risk we can out of their risk bucket because we care about them.
Our AI. Can you talk about artificial intelligence and how that is playing out in the drone sphere and our capabilities currently and then maybe for the future?
Yeah. So I'm Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, which means I'm supposed to be bringing new technologies to the DoD. Our first principle in our group is applied AI and AI first. So when we think about any system, software, hardware, any weapon systems, like how does AI apply to the system? Can it improve it? And how would we use it, right? For simulation, wargaming. For logistics, how do you kind of use AI to better plan logistics? How to use AI to do better targeting? To determine if what you're seeing is an enemy aircraft or a friendly aircraft. So we're using the intelligence of AI, we're starting to use it everywhere we can, and I think you're going to see a sort of slope like this of use of AI in not only these weapons, but in everything we do at DoD.